In this video, we're going to talk about the top 5 complaints about lawyers and how to avoid them so they don't come back to bite you in the ass when you're practicing law. So let's start with number 5 and we'll do a countdown. The first one is lack of empathy. Most people stereotype lawyers as sharks, cold-hearted, robotic, basically detached from reality. And that really does not go over well for most clients. So it doesn't mean you have to be necessarily sympathetic to every emotion that the client is having, but you certainly need to recognize where that client is coming from, the position they find themselves in, and you have to understand how to be able to emotionally relate to that client. But also make sure that you're staying professional and separating the emotions from the actual work itself. Perhaps periodically reminding the client that it's okay to have strong emotions, that you understand them and that you empathize with them. But unfortunately, the law does not always account for those types of emotions. And so there's a fine line between being empathetic, but also getting caught up in those emotions. Number 4, unexpected delays and slow progress. Clients think that things take too long. They want everything done right away, especially if you're in litigation or any other types of complex legal matter. As we all know, they tend to drag on for much longer than people think. And as a result, they also cost a lot more than people expect. And so the delay is a combination of people not getting the results that they want as soon as they want, and also the discomfort of knowing that more delays equals more money. So the way that you avoid this complaint from clients is, first of all, making sure that their expectations are set accurately up front to make sure that they know the timelines could be much longer than they expected, and talk them through why those timelines are the way they are and certain things that you can't anticipate and you can't control. If timing is essential to the client, and for some reason they have priorities that have deadlines in their own mind or for their own personal reasons, you need to evaluate the way in which you handle the case or the matter. And in some cases, you might not be fighting as hard on some of the smaller things so that you can move things along more quickly. Number 3, lack of transparency. The issue is the client doesn't know what's going on. They're not properly informed, or they're not seeing all of the back and forth and the work that's being done by you as a lawyer and your firm, and between you and the opposing counsel. And so the client feels as though they have no idea what's happening. They don't understand why the work is being done. And sometimes the attorneys will go ahead and do a lot of work, but not actually inform the client of what work is being done and why. And so this is a transparency issue. And so one of the best things to do is to pass along all documents and all communication that takes place so that the client has a good sense of what's happening. And what I've learned is that clients really appreciate this. They tend to thank you every single time you give them an update. They like to see the work that you're doing so that they can verify that the work is being done and it's being done well. And then that also goes into fees and their comfort with the fees that you're charging. So the transparency is a really important thing. The other thing about it is to make sure that the client is involved in some of the decision making. Again, your job as a lawyer is not to decide for them. It's to counsel them and provide them with the information so that they can make the choice that they feel most comfortable with. And then you can pursue their interests based on those choices. And transparency plays a big role in that. The number 2 most common complaint that you hear from clients is lack of communication. And this kind of follows on to transparency, but that communication, in my experience, is a combination of keeping the client totally informed about what's happening, which includes all communication with opposing counsel or with the court or with any of the other parties or professionals who are working on a matter, keeping the client informed on your overall strategy and why it is you're taking certain actions and making certain decisions, keeping the client informed on certain risks that may be arising in any particular matter and ways to mitigate those risks, or different options that the client may have in moving the matter forward. And involving the client in that decision-making process is essential, and regularly communicating with the client is a big part of that. At least in my experience, you should be communicating with the client anytime it's warranted, but at least once a week, if not daily, depending on how active the legal matter is. And again, that will help them feel like they know what you're doing, they like what you're doing, that they're involved in the case. And at least from a practitioner standpoint, I like the client being informed, so that you can always go back and say, we talked about this, or look at the email I sent you, or you made the decision that. Whatever it is, the more informed and involved the client is, the more responsibility they have for the case. And that's something that's good for lawyers. It's the way I like to practice, and I think it's mutually beneficial for both the lawyer and the client. The last biggest complaint that clients have about lawyers is high fees. Well, what does that mean exactly? In my opinion, it's the value that the client received versus the legal fees. And so, I don't know the rule in every single state for legal fees, but generally, the states that I practice in, legal fees must be reasonable. Or the other way that they write the rule is that legal fees must not be unreasonable. And I think what that really means is that the fees that you charge have to be commensurate with the value that you've delivered. And that's really, really important. I send out some very large bills, and clients actually think that they're very reasonable. And the idea behind that is because I'm providing value that far exceeds the amount of money that they're paying me. And so I think that's really what it comes down to. So what should you be thinking about with regard to value and fees? You should be making sure that your clients have asked for the work that you're doing, that they understand why you're doing the work, and that you translate for them the value of that work to them. It may be value in dollars, it may be value in their rights, it may be value in the outcome, but also you need to be thinking about efficiency, making the best decisions to get the best results for the least amount of time and money to be put into it. And communicating upfront with the client to determine what work should be done, having them pre-approve that work with an estimate or a budget of what you think the fees are going to be for that work. Clients love this. The worst thing you can do is send a client a very large bill that is unexpected. That will for sure trigger a complaint by a client. But so long as the client knows that there's going to be a lot of work in any given month, you've talked about it, they understand why, and they've essentially approved it and know what to expect, then you can send a bill that's right on point with what you discussed, and you can avoid that complaint. One last thing I'll say on this is if your clients complain about any one of these 5 items, that will cost you in what will ultimately be a negative experience by that client, and they will probably tell other people about that negative experience, and that will harm you for months or possibly years to come. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is to avoid these types of complaints by implementing some of these strategies, and to work as hard as you can to make sure your clients are very happy with the work that you do, that you provide very high value regardless of the fee, and that they're made part of the process from start to finish.